In recent years, Canadians have grown increasingly alarmed by a disturbing pattern in high-profile criminal cases. Many involve individuals already out on bail. This unsettling trend has prompted a nationwide debate on the effectiveness of the country's bail system, with growing calls for reform. Law enforcement officials, particularly in crime-affected regions like Vancouver's downtown Eastside, have raised concerns about a catch-and-release dynamic, where repeat offenders cycle through the system, often committing new crimes while awaiting trial. Superintendent Ryan Hogan of York Regional Police describes the current bail framework as fundamentally flawed, emphasizing how loopholes allow habitual offenders to avoid meaningful accountability. Public frustration has reached a boiling point as the system's shortcomings become increasingly visible, fueling anxiety and eroding trust in law enforcement and the courts. As the debate intensifies, Canada's bail reform efforts stand at a critical juncture, with provinces like Ontario and British Columbia leading the charge. The stakes are high. Will these reforms restore public confidence in the justice system, or will they deepen existing inequities without addressing the core challenges? The answers lie not only in the policies themselves but in how they are implemented, and whether they can strike the delicate balance between safety and fairness. A justice system outpaced by crime. Over the past 2 decades, Canada's transformation from a high-trust society to a low-trust one has left the nation's justice system ill-equipped to address escalating crime. Once defined by a shared ethos of accountability and honor, Canadians relied on trust as a social contract, ultimately enabling the development of a justice system focused on rehabilitation rather than punishment. This fragile balance worked until it didn't. Rapid social shifts, economic inequality, and urbanization have eroded these shared values, leaving behind a fractured society unmoored from the norms that once upheld it. Yet Canada's laws and enforcement strategies remain stuck in another era, unable to adapt to a world where individual responsibility is no longer assumed. The result? Communities face rising levels of crime, theft, and repeat offenses, as gaps in the legal system are exploited with impunity. Perhaps most emblematic of this growing divide is Canada's ailing bail system, where repeat offenders cycle in and out of custody, enabled by outdated processes that prioritize leniency over public safety. Designed in better times to balance individual rights and societal accountability, the system now unintentionally fosters crime sprees by releasing high-risk individuals with few safeguards in place. Those facing charges for theft, vandalism, or violent offenses are continuously granted bail, only to re-offend within days or weeks. This dynamic reinforces a dangerous feedback loop. Law enforcement apprehends offenders, the courts release them, and citizens are left disillusioned by a system that appears incapable of protecting communities. Each failure further widens the gap between the justice system's intention to rehabilitate and its frightening reality of enabling unchecked recidivism. The link between Canada's failing bail system and declining social trust couldn't be clearer. A justice system built on principles of honor cannot function in a society where trust is no longer a given. As offenders exploit the leniency of laws tailored for a different era, Canadians are left questioning whether their institutions can enforce accountability and restore the foundations of a cohesive society. The challenge is systemic and cultural. Canada must revisit its laws, regulations, and enforcement strategies to reflect today's realities. But equally critical is the need to rebuild trust, without which no justice system can succeed, no matter how modernized. Ontario leads Canada's bail reform efforts. Ontario has taken center stage in Canada's bail reform conversation, spearheading efforts to tighten regulations and address concerns over the revolving door of justice. Responding to public outrage and law enforcement pressures, provincial leaders are urging the federal government to amend the criminal code to prioritize public safety. Key proposals include limiting bail eligibility for individuals charged with violent crimes, repeat offenders, and those who breach bail conditions. Associate Minister of Auto Theft and Bail Reform Graham McGregor has been a prominent advocate for these changes, emphasizing the risks posed by current bail policies. "We see too many cases where individuals who should be detained are back on the streets, posing a risk to communities," he stated. This perspective aligns with law enforcement officials like Superintendent Hogan, who warn that without stricter bail measures, crime rates may rise, further eroding public trust in the justice system. Critics, however, caution against overly punitive reforms. Civil liberties advocates and legal experts argue that tightening bail restrictions could disproportionately affect marginalized populations, particularly in urban areas with high rates of poverty and social challenges. While these concerns highlight broader societal issues, the current debate remains focused on balancing public safety with the need for fair and effective bail policies. Public safety and bail decisions. At the core of bail reform is a critical dilemma: how to ensure public safety without undermining the fundamental rights of accused individuals. In British Columbia, this tension is particularly evident in communities like Vancouver's downtown Eastside, where systemic inequities, poverty, mental health struggles, and addiction are often intertwined with criminal behavior. Law enforcement officials argue that stricter bail conditions are necessary to protect vulnerable residents from the harms of repeat offenders who violate bail terms. However, legal and civil liberties groups caution that such reforms risk tipping the scales too far, disproportionately affecting marginalized populations who already face heightened scrutiny and limited access to legal representation. In an area like the downtown Eastside, where many offenses stem from survival-based behaviors linked to poverty and addiction, critics contend that overly rigid bail policies could exacerbate existing social inequities by criminalizing vulnerable groups rather than addressing their needs. Achieving a balance requires reforms that prioritize risk assessment and judicial discretion. Experts suggest measures such as enhanced monitoring for high-risk offenders combined with expanded pre-trial services, including legal aid and support for accused individuals struggling with addiction. By tailoring bail conditions to individual circumstances, policymakers can ensure public safety while preserving fairness, a crucial component of an effective justice system. Solutions beyond the courtroom. While bail reform is critical to addressing immediate public safety concerns, experts agree that sustainable solutions must go beyond judicial measures. Tougher bail conditions may deter some offenders in the short term, but without addressing the systemic drivers of crime, such as addiction, homelessness, and mental health crises, the cycle of crime and release will continue. Proponents of a balanced approach emphasize the need for robust social support alongside bail reform. In British Columbia, programs focused on harm reduction, affordable housing, and mental health services are often stretched thin, leaving vulnerable populations without the resources they need to avoid reoffending. By investing in social infrastructure, governments can reduce reliance on the justice system to manage issues rooted in social inequity. "We cannot arrest our way out of this crisis," one advocate stated, underscoring the importance of upstream solutions. Another promising avenue is the expansion of diversion programs that offer alternatives to pre-trial detention. These initiatives, already piloted in parts of Canada, combine judicial oversight with access to treatment and support services. By prioritizing rehabilitation over incarceration, diversion programs aim to lower recidivism while easing the strain on courts and detention facilities. Ultimately, a strategy that integrates social reform with judicial safeguards offers the most promise for lasting public safety. A decisive moment for Canada's bail policies. The bail reform debate underscores a justice system caught between protecting public safety and preserving the presumption of innocence. Amid mounting pressure for immediate solutions, experts caution that rushed policies risk unintended consequences, potentially deepening systemic inequities. Provinces like British Columbia and Ontario are pursuing parallel reforms, yet the core question remains: will stricter bail measures reduce crime, or will they simply shift the problem without resolving its complexities? The key lies in designing reforms that are both effective and fair. Strengthening bail restrictions for high-risk offenders, such as those accused of violent crimes or with a history of repeat offenses, must be balanced with safeguards to avoid disproportionately affecting marginalized groups. This requires rigorous judicial oversight and a commitment to equitable application. While some argue for broader social investments to address the root causes of crime, the immediate priority is refining bail policies to rebuild public trust in the justice system. Canada's justice system stands at a pivotal juncture, with the outcomes of this debate set to shape the nation's crime landscape for decades. The path forward demands decisive, well-calibrated action, whether through legislative changes, enhanced enforcement, or a combination of strategies. Without such measures, the risk of perpetuating a flawed system remains high, leaving both victims and the accused without the resolution they deserve.